What does the common phrase "I am that" mean?
In language, in making contrasts, the I, which is the subject, is that which is the object. They are not two. So it's just an effort. It's a poetic way of trying to put into words a that which is wordless.
How do I overcome shyness?
In one word, love. So what does love mean? Love is when there's the seeing of no gap between the apparent subject and the apparent object. There's just an embrace, a natural, simple, gapless embrace.
Why don't I experience happiness all the time?
Because there is no time for there to be all the time. So fundamentally, everything that can be experienced is always a movement, and a movement is always ever changing because it's relational. If it was a constant, you couldn't knowledge it.
Nice. Is the self in myself, yourself, God?
It's the fundamental isness that gives rise to everything. Some people use the word God to point to that, but like all words, the word God is problematic because it's relational. So it means different things at different times to different people.
Is the self at the heart of all suffering?
Again, it depends how you're using that word suffering. There can be pain if there is a self or not a self. But if suffering is the stickiness that takes ownership of that pain, then you could say that's the suffering aspect of discomfort, in which, like the businessman takes possession of that discomfort, and in that possession, by holding it, bringing it in, it is intensified from discomfort into suffering. It's a movement that doesn't need to be. Suffering always has a history, whereas pain and pleasure really don't leave behind an impression if there's no ownership.
Is stopping thinking the goal of meditation?
I've often heard it framed like that. But again, meditation is a very wide-ranging term used for many different things.
What would you say
Many
the goal of
traditions.
meditation is? Sorry.
At its fundamental, it's normally just a break-in mechanism, a break-in method to break the illusion that there is a meditator.
Is our being the same being as God?
No, because sameness suggests that there are two separate things for there to be same. It's closer, more intimate than that. There's no gap, so the sense or the measurement called sameness doesn't arise. There are no two things to be the same.
Why does consciousness allow things like violence? Why does consciousness allow awful atrocities?
It sees no other. So both creation and destruction are non-different. Each moment has to destroy the present moment for there to be life. So in that sense, it's fractal on all different levels. So using the word violence in a very neutral way, the very birth of time and space is like a violence to the intrinsic two-ness of what is. So the very movement of time and space is inherently violent. It's unavoidable because it intrinsically is what is. And again, there is no separate something which at its core is violent or non-violent. Again, these are just all simplifications, extreme simplifications of something which is immensely immeasurable.
Does everything happen for a reason?
Again, there can be a movement called reason, but the movement is irrespective of there needing to be a reason, and yet it can appear to be a reason. The ocean can be a wave called reason, but it's simultaneously not limited by that wave. So it is and isn't simultaneously.
Is the external world purely subjective?
Again, these are extreme simplistic dualities of subjective or objective. There is no objective without the subject, and vice versa. You will find that this immeasurableness appears as a subject and an object. In the dance, they're like two dynamic inputs, which gives rise to what appears. They're a circle, really, and we just, for simplicity, make that circle more into a straight line and say objective, subjective. But they are not two.
Nice.
So one doesn't depend on the other. It's more intimate than that. Much more miraculous than that.
Earlier you said, have you ever met the thinker of your thoughts? How can there be thoughts without a thinker?
That's the arrogance of the businessman. How can there be life without me in it? Actually, very easily. You'll find that life happens and then the businessman appears later on, like lightning and thunder. And the businessman is like the thunder and takes ownership of the lightning. And yet the lightning had happened, and in a way, they're already gone by the time the ownership happens.
What is the difference between myself and my mind?
What do you mean by myself? And what do you mean by my mind?
Sorry, rhetorical.
So difference, there can be difference. There can be infinite differences. But again, when we simplify that a difference must mean separate. Because we think there are things. But possibly, fundamentally, that's an error of simplistic efficiency, as it were.
Is there then no difference between consciousness and awareness? Or consciousness and attention?
Again, words can be used by many people in different ways. So the way I use those words, like if attention was on that plane, attention would be like that aspect of that movement. It's a more, because attention takes a lot more energy and resources, so it's more limited because it burns more calories. So and because it's limited, it can only process so much. So it has to, in a way, to attend to something, it deletes the majority of the data, as it were. So it has to delete most of the consciousness if you're using that word as one thing conscious of another thing. Almost looking at a landscape. You're conscious of that landscape, but your attention is more specific to a certain area of that landscape at any given time. Because it's more detailed. A bit like a camera shooting in JPEG or RAW. The attention is raw data, and the consciousness is more like a JPEG in that it deletes it. It doesn't take on board all the data to have to process it. It gives a priority. It's like a hierarchy to consciousness, and attention being at the tip of the hierarchy.
Okay, final question. Really easy one. 3 words. Do I exist?
You're the only thing that does exist.
I knew I was important.
More so than you could ever dream of. It's just we often sell ourselves short because the businessman is more conscious of what he thinks he doesn't have.